Okay, well, good morning, everybody. And when I say morning, oh boy, do I mean morning. Welcome to Paramook 2023, also known as Parapsychology Research and Education. Our course has been going on since 2015 and has been supported all of that time by Lisa Coley and Anna Anomalous of the Parapsychology Foundation in New York City. Our topic this year is apparitions, hauntings, and poltergeists. The course actually started on the 27th of February and will end on the 1st of April, although we have some ideas for keeping the discussion going. Today we're having Beth Darlington, and I will get into her biography in a second. So Beth is from Access Paranormal in Kent. And the topic today is PAE's possible alternate explanations when investigating paranormal phenomena. With almost 15 years of active paranormal investigation experience, Beth Darlington is a wealth of knowledge and a valuable contributor for the field of interest. Having started her journey while living in the UK, she then moved to Australia and joined a paranormal investigation team. With her own vision for education for the middle-level investigator, she decided to branch out on her own as an independent paranormal investigator, and Access Paranormal was born. Originally a website for the Australian paranormal field, it has since branched out to one of the leading online learning websites for investigators around the world. Equally passionate about events, Beth has hosted many information talk nights, right up to hosting international guests, the Klingee brothers, for example, alongside the Australian Paranormal Society. Beth is an international speaker and has been at Paracon Australia, Scarefest, Las Vegas Paracon, Skepticon Australia, and the conferences of the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. She's a featured author and podcaster, as well as being a qualified trainer and assessor. She has studied with the Rhine Institute and the School of Parapsychology and is a member of the Society of Psychical Research, the Ghost Club, and ASSAP. So now I will end my show. Well, let me pop over just one more and mention that while I am, oh, it's not cooperating. There we go. Okay, I went too far. There we are. I'm not going to read her abstract because I want to give her the most time to get in there, but we will have both the biography and the abstract in the description under the video, and the video should be out later today. I still am working on Hideyuki's video, but that should be out actually about an hour after we finish here. So we'll have both things earlier today. So now let me unshare.
Take that as it is. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Darlington. I have a website and a company called Access Paranormal. And in today's session, we're going to be looking at possible alternative explanations. Now, a lot of people in the paranormal community call this debunking. I tend to lean towards using the term PAE, or possible alternative explanations. And reason being is debunking derives from the word bunko, which means there's potentially fraudulent intention in place. And with obviously back in mid 1800s, when the interest in psychical phenomena and the study and the research started, debunking would have been quite a popular word, and a word that would be used quite often, and for the right purpose, because obviously looking at possible mediums and psychics, there's always the possibility of fraudulent intention. But obviously, as things have progressed, it's not always an area of interest where people look at when they're investigating possible paranormal phenomena. So for me, I find that PAE is a better term to use. It's more true to the work that I do and a lot of other people when they're looking and investigating possible paranormal phenomena. I also call this the paranormal party pooper session. And reason being is that it kind of takes all the fun out of anything that's potentially paranormal that happens in someone's home, or if you're investigating a private or residential case. So it's all these areas that can help explain what somebody might consider a paranormal experience. So a little bit about me. Of course, you've already gone through that, so I won't bore you anymore. So today's session, it's 9 areas of psychological and environmental science that can be confused with possible paranormal haunting or paranormal phenomena that's been experienced. We're going to break it down into 3 areas. So in these 9 areas, we're going to look at what it is, how it actually does affect paranormal investigating, and how you can actually detect it or find your possible alternative explanation. Let's get stuck in. So these are 9 that I found that are most common. So, I mean, there's probably a few that you obviously would have come across. Some you may not have, but we'll go into these in a little bit more detail. Pens at the ready. First one, false REM readings. What is it? Now, a lot of people who like to use gadgets to detect, changes in the environment. Some people believe it's detect spirit. Jury's still out on that one. Some investigators tend to use what we call a REM pod. And in the the paranormal community, REM stands for radiating electromagnetic. So that's what we use that acronym for. And what that device there is a REM pod. And the antenna at the top there that sticks out actually emits EMF. And if anything comes near it physically and breaks it, it will actually sound off. So it gives an alarm, and the closer you move your hands to the antenna, the louder it actually is. And the lights there also go off as well. So it's like a lovely little mini Christmas tree in the dark. It's wonderful for that purpose. So to be able to get a false REM reading, which can actually happen, this is how it happens. So radio waves. Radio waves can set off that frequency that is being emitted. It can actually interact with it. So nothing can be anywhere near it, and the radio waves can actually set that off. So that can be coming from your car key. So when you unlock your car or lock your car, that will be something that can set it off. Unfortunately, I've been on a tour where I found the tour of this ghost hunting event actually used that to set them off in a false way, which was not great to see. And I actually have read also in the past that other investigator or ghost hunting groups have actually done that as well, just to make it look like there might be some spirit interaction with this particular device when there clearly is not. And of course, two-way radios. A lot of paranormal teams who cover big, large locations will actually be using them. They can definitely set them off and interact and give a false REM reading. So how do you detect it or find your PAE with this kind of stuff? Again, be aware of what equipment can actually set it off. So say, for instance, we've already spoke about two-way radios, understanding that, no one talk or use them at the time when you're using that equipment. Also, phones are constantly seeking a signal, a radio frequency signal. They will send that out as well. A lot of teams, when they do start and get stuck into an investigation, and they, as I call a visual as such, they will actually turn their phones on to silent or switch them off completely. That's a way to be able to discount it. But that's, again, if you do want to use a REM pod, I'm personally not a big fan of it. It's more like a fun thing to do on a ghost hunt, and definitely would not use one when dealing with private or residential case. All right, area number 2, confirmation bias. Now, this was a video I created, so hopefully, guys, the audio and the visual will be still okay. So let me know if it's not.
If people are having trouble with the audio, maybe if you can pop it up as high as you can get it.
Oh, okay. So as in the actual audio itself. Okay, then.
If you do you have a URL for the YouTube video on this one?
I can do that later.
Yeah, if you can share that in the chat, then everybody will be set up, and I'll be able to grab it.
Totally fine. But yeah, I guess I can pick it up from here, sort of thing. So, people who do have, an example of confirmation bias can be where, obviously the disaster of 9/11, some people, still believe that there was a conspiracy theory. And if you go and look for that information, you can actually find it. But that's because they're obviously very forward into thinking that that's what it is, and they're going to look for information until they actually find it. So that's a type of confirmation bias, or part of it. So that might just go to the next slide. So how does this, so how does confirmation bias actually affect paranormal investigating? This is just an example. Anxious people are very susceptible to confirmation bias. An example can be if a client you are dealing with has been taunted in the past by others, and others worry that people don't like them, they could be biased to the extreme idea that they may have a demonic entity in their home. Now, I'm talking extreme here, it's a very extreme example, but it can actually influence it. Having dealt with years of negativity from people, they would actively find ways to confirm paranormal activity as being negative as well. So how do you detect it? It's how would you find your PAE when it came to confirmation bias? It's by being aware of it, being aware from yourself, being aware with the people that you're dealing with. When I take on cases, the very first question I ask is, what do you believe is happening in your home or your place of business? And then I can find from there where their stands are. A lot of people can say, I believe it's my partner, someone that's passed over that's trying to contact me. Okay, so at least I know what I'm dealing with. And obviously my next question is, if I'm able to find reasonable explanations for this that may not be paranormal, how do you feel about that? So you kind of gauge where they're going to be with their own confirmation bias about something being actually haunted. Also, as for yourself, actively find ways to find information, and that is different. Sorry, I'm just moving my thing around here. Okay, so hang on a second. Nope. Just doing this so I can actually read. Brilliant. So so actively find people and information that is different to your own opinion. This can give you a more rounded way of looking at situations and will help with making better decisions. The side note from that is doing this is a sign of confidence to openly source the information that goes against your own beliefs. For myself, occasionally, I will have a look at what the Flat Earth Society is doing, just something off chance and a bit of a read. I personally believe that the world is round, but sometimes, seeing how people have formulated their information as well, it's a sign of, sign of confidence, the fact that you can go to the dark side and read about it. All right, orbs. Now, those in the paranormal community will know that this is a bane of many investigators' pain, I guess you could say. There are a lot of people out there in the community that believe spirit orbs exist. They may very much do so. I've interviewed people that have physically seen what they believe is an orb, and I think there's probably more credibility with that than something that turns up on someone's photo when they've taken a photo in a haunted location. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, there's some fabulous bug shapes there, some really nice, pretty ones. But of course, they're bugs. And on the right-hand side is a photo that was taken and given to me. And obviously, for me, I believe it could more than likely be moisture orbs, purely because on the roof there is what looks like mold on the top there. Now, how does this affect paranormal investigating? Dust particles can reflect light, and they can give the impression that they glow in the dark. But dust is actually made up of dirt, pollen, grains from flowers, and spores made by molds and other fungi. So as you can see, some of these can reflect light when they have the light shone upon them. And sometimes there'll be people that may come back to you when they say, look, I think I caught a spirit orb in my photo. The first, hey, look, it's glowing. And often I will say, well, is it casting its own shadow? So it's the first gentle way of saying, I'm not really sure what you think may have actually been photographed is actually a spirit orb. Lens flare is another phenomenon that can appear on your camera photos and can look like an orb. Lens flare can be bigger than 1/10 of the frame size, and it's caused by a bright light source either in the frame or the shot you're about to take. Or this light source is just outside it. But for it to be lens flare, the source of light needs to be in front of the camera. Now, this light that enters the camera lens bounces around internally, reflecting from its optical surfaces within the camera. Now, some people have come forward with me and showed a photo and said, look, this orb, it's purple. And I know a lot of people believe that purple is a very spiritual color, but there's an explanation for that too. Your lens flare has color. What does it mean? Your camera has an anti-flare lens coating and can change the color of the reflection. So that's another way to explain a spirit orb. Now, this is video which you don't need audio for. There are people talking in it, but it's more just from a visual perspective. So have a look at this. This is a video of an orb that was recorded at Waverley Hills Sanatorium, which I have been to, a lovely location just from a historical perspective. So we're going to play it and have a bit of a think whether or not they might have actually caught something that could be a bit interesting. So interesting. I thankfully have been to the location. It's a sanatorium. There's no glass in the windows, but it's very drafty, very airy. They do events in this particular area that they're in at the moment, where they've got lots of Halloween set up because it's very popular. So there's leftover bits and pieces. I personally don't think it's a spirit orb. I think it's a bit of dust and a bit of string. Again, they're filming in night vision as well, so the camera is already struggling to record or find any visual under light. And, I always make a bit of a joke that everybody looks good in green when it comes to the paranormal, but again, it's the camera's struggling to find any sort of light source as well. And so everything's very pixelated. And of course, something like that obviously in a very dark area with very limited light, you would actually be able to see it with your own eyes, but obviously the camera has picked it up. Right, how do you detect it or find your possible alternative explanation? Know your equipment, know its limitations, know what it can do, what it can't do, whether it's your phone camera, your camera on your phone, your digital camera, your video recorders, anything with regards to visual recording and photos. Know your equipment and know its limitations. All right, effects of high EMF. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, it's a bit of a graph about the different spectrum with regards to EMF. And of course, on the right-hand side, there's some areas in someone's home, typical kind of home, which actually gives you an idea of an indication of different levels of EMF. EMF's everywhere, it's everywhere, but obviously at different levels. So high EMF, what has this got to do with paranormal investigating? Some people can be more prone to EMF, even in the most natural, normal of levels. This condition is called electrosensitivity and means a person can experience discomfort and even serious health problems if exposed to EMF. And in the answer to that as well is it's long-term exposure as well. I know for myself, when I've gone into locations, and it's often in the basement, they'll have a lot of wiring on the roof there, depending on the age of the actual building itself. And I actually do end up feeling kind of apprehensive a little bit. It feels like the air is quite thick and I feel uncomfortable. And I know it's because of the EMF. It's got nothing to do with it being a spooky place. It's got everything to do with the fact that, because I walk out and I feel fine. So, but that's myself. Exposure to high EMF can cause people to feel nervous and other symptoms like fatigue, stress, sleep disturbances. You've got skin symptoms like facial prickling, burning sensations and rashes. Body symptoms like pains and aches in your muscles, eye symptoms such as burning sensation and foggy thinking, as well as depression. So when you look at those types of symptoms, and you could be dealing with a case and someone's displaying some of these, you start to think it actually, some people think, oh my gosh, you must have a negative entity in your home that's disrupting your life and physically making you feel uncomfortable. It could very well just be high EMF. Less common symptoms can be ear, nose, and throat symptoms and digestive disorders with infertility. And we're talking super less common symptoms. And in utter extreme cases, leukemia in children, breast cancer, or cancer clusters have been linked to high exposure to EMF. Again, high and long term as well. But again, this is very extreme, more than likely not. So how do you detect it? How do you find your PAE when it comes to high EMF? Look for levels of EMF where people say they're experiencing the same symptoms. There was a case I dealt with where a guy was having very similar symptoms to that last list. And he slept in his bedroom, of course, but next to his bed was an alarm clock, beautiful old alarm clock, something that his grandfather had given him. Something from, I think, may have been from early 70s, late 60s. And one of the suggestions when we had detection equipment, which I'll go into soon, realized there was some decent EMF coming from that particular alarm clock. So we moved it to the other end of the room and said, look, let's see if your sleep is better. And sure enough, he, a couple of weeks later, excuse me, a couple of weeks later, he was fine, slept well, it was great. So again, have a detection equipment to be able to find out in these areas people are feeling uncomfortable. Right, cryptomnesia. What is it? Now, this is an unusual one. Not a lot of people in the general paranormal community actually know of this. And it's probably more for if someone's looking at investigating psychics and mediums. The term cryptomnesia means crypto hidden and amnesia memories, which is hidden memory. And it's remembering things you've forgotten before, not like something where you put your car keys if you've lost them, but it's something that is known in neuroscience as latent memory. Now, when things occur in our lives, we forget those experiences soon after the event, but we retain bits of the event, or as neuroscience calls it, latent memories. Now, these can be recalled if we think about something that is associated with it, like something that you smell or you see. And now, if we remember everything all the time, like watching a movie, there would be some serious information overload. These memories are also subject to our own influences over time, like when we perceive and justify ourselves. And they can start to change slightly over time to what we believe actually happened instead. We're all fallible to it. We can all happen. My fiance, bless him, fell over and fractured his shoulder just before Christmas. And then, of course, 4 months later, he thought, well, actually, hang on a second, my other shoulder's really sore. Maybe, hang on, why is that? Maybe did I damage the other shoulder as well? And I said, no, sweetheart, you fell over on your right hand, your right shoulder, not your left, but your left's overcompensating for the fact that you can't move this as much. So, in his mind, he was already starting to sort of change what actually happened. I'm like, no, that's what I'm there for. All right, so how does this affect paranormal investigating? Psychic readings. Most of our long-term memory is in important emotional events. And psychics tend to give information that are emotionally important. Maybe this emotional information can trigger their own hidden memories, which may make them think their information is from spirit. So we're talking, it's a long shot. Or if they may have read of a death in the section of the newspaper, I'm not really sure how many people do that anymore, or heard someone talk about it or seen it on TV, and then later is recalling this information. And also think about reincarnation. The thing is with cryptomnesia, it's not due to fraudulent intent. This is literally a brain slip, essentially, or memory slip. So how do you detect it? This is probably, out of all of the 9 areas in this talk, it is the hardest one to try and detect or find your PAE. Cryptomnesia is something that can happen more likely when you are stressed when you're reading or searching for information. Your ability to focus on what information you are obtaining and where is less. This is something to keep in mind when dealing with people who claim to be mediums. How would you handle cryptomnesia? Well, if someone is retelling a story of their past life and research into the details of that person's recount, but as with cryptomnesia, it can be difficult to prove if the person hasn't found this information first. So again, it's a very, very grey area. Another way is to provide information or part of that information as inaccurate and see if this is something that could be retold at a later date. Again, monitoring that is very difficult, but as an idea. Again, it's tricky to find out 100% that someone has had a cryptomnesia event, but being aware that this can happen greatly helps with paranormal investigating. All right. Idiomotor effect or idiomotor effect. I think it depends on what part of the world you come from. Now, if we want to pick up a piece of paper or get up from a chair, we would think about it first. It's something that is conscious decision and it's called volition. But we can also do things subconsciously, and that is known as without volition. Now, there are 3 categories of unconscious actions or without volition. Exitomotor. Now, it's the things that we unconsciously do that keeps us alive. We've got breathing and swallowing when we eat. We don't have to think about that or remembering, oh, I've got to remember to swallow now. It's like, it's just natural. It's just there. And we do it unconsciously every day. You've got sensory motor, and this is the type of thing we do when we react to fight or flight from a scary movie, or if you feel pain. So if you touch hot water, or you instantly pull your hand away as a reflex action. And then there's called the idiomotor effect. This is when a person unconsciously moves because of an unexpected or suggestion, so expectation or suggestion. Now, it can be the tiniest motor movement that this person has no idea they're doing it. And they can often feel as though someone is moving an object they are in contact with, or with the paranormal, it could be considered another entity. So how does this affect paranormal investigating? Some people use dowsing rods to find water and claim it to be very effective. But some paranormal investigators use dowsing rods to find spirits in a room or outside a location. Dowsing usually starts with the rods both out in front, and as the person moves around the room, they are meant to cross over each other as a positive sign or point in the right direction of where the apparent spirit is. If the person is already in a place that is deemed to be haunted, they could actually unconsciously move those rods in the direction where they may feel most apprehensive. Again, we're looking at the PAE here. This is things to think about when investigating. I have used dowsing rods on and off over the last 12 months, had some very interesting results. Intriguing. The Idiomotor effect is also something to consider with Ouija boards, psychic boards, and glass divination. When using these tools for attempted communication with the spirit world, we are already waiting and wanting something paranormal to occur. So again, you've got your own confirmation bias still kicking off already. And then obviously there's the possibility of the Idiomotor effect of actually wanting to make that move. Your hand can guide the planchette or glass on the table to the point to the letters or in the desired direction in response. Usually the movement of the object to certain parts of the table or the board can't be replicated in the exact same way. This can further enhance a person's belief that this too could be paranormal. So it's random movements. So how do you detect it or find your PAE? One idea is if you want to explore using a Ouija board, and a lot of people are either for or against, I've used them more times, I've got hands and toes and I'm fine, each to their own, or an upturned glass, but wanting to eliminate the possibility of the Idiomotor effect. Run the experiment by blindfolding the people at the table with their fingers on the planchette and have a person stand outside the circle asking the questions. I've had it where we've had a group of people around a table with an upturned glass, and the person asking the questions was completely out of earshot and right down the other end of the hallway. So that's another way to do it as well. The results were quite interesting. Nothing came out. The glass didn't move. So yeah, interesting. Give it a shot. Infrasound, what is it? There are generally 4 ranges of sound. We've got subsonic, infrasonic, audio spectrum, and ultrasound. The infrasound is a sound that is below 20 hertz and is below the level of human hearing. I think it might even be 18. Elephants and whales are able to communicate through infrasound as it can travel long distances. And just because we can't hear it doesn't mean we can't actually feel it. So what are some of the causes of infrasound? Elephants and whales don't just create infrasound, but it can be created from ocean waves, storms, vibrating pipes, and some of the older style fans, some diesel engines and wind turbines as well. Now, normally I would play this, but I do not want to get sued. It's an infrasound track. Reason being is if you, obviously, if you can't hear it, often people will naturally turn the volume up on their computers and audio devices. But by doing that, you can actually risk damaging the driver of your speakers. And I often will do this using my own speakers in a talk face-to-face in a room, but I won't be doing this today because I'd like your speakers to continue working after this session. But I have had some interesting results where some people feel no different at all. Other people feel a bit weird. And again, that could also be down to confirmation bias. I've always said, I'm going to play this and you might feel spooky, and that may just be enough for someone to feel that they feel uncomfortable when being played infrasound. So how does it affect paranormal investigating? What's infrasound got to do with it? Just because we can't hear infrasound doesn't mean we can't feel it. And this alone does all sorts of things to our bodies. If infrasound can hit a certain strength and frequency, apparently it's been known to vibrate eyes which distort our vision, apparently. This can also be an explanation for someone maybe witnessing an apparition. Some research suggests it can distort the inner ear, causing disorientation. So the low vibration also affects the rest of our body. Now, symptoms of infrasound can be headaches, nausea, bad dreams, sleep disorders, feelings of paranoia, depression, fear, anxiety, even chest pressure. These similar symptoms are from possible paranormal activity. So think about it. Someone's getting depressed, feeling fear, anxiety, they're not able to sleep, they're getting headaches. Some people who aren't aware of infrasound think while they're investigating a case, oh, this might be something paranormal, when it's literally infrasound. Now, infrasound isn't something we recognize hearing, and yet we're feeling it. Because you're physically feeling this but not hearing it, your mind starts to try and find out what's happening. The longer this goes on and the more fear a person begins to feel, and of course the physical signs that come with that emotion, so you're constantly fight or flight, your body's going, I'm feeling something, but I can't see it, I don't know where it is. Your senses can become so heightened that it may exaggerate the slightest of sensations. So how do you detect it and find your PAE? Are the symptoms consistent with someone experiencing infrasound? There was a very distressed individual that rang me probably about 10 years ago now. If anyone knows Australia, there's an area called the Gold Coast. It's a bit like Vegas by the sea. And there's lots of high-rise buildings, and it's a beautiful location. And this poor guy was on the 12th floor, and there's the beach, and then there's a road, and that's where his apartment building was. And he said, every time I'm in my home, I feel anxious. I don't like it. I feel like someone's watching me. I can't stand it. And I said, I went through more questions. And I said, well, where are you located? And more than likely, it would have been because he's near the ocean, so he's got that, but also the wind as well. I think there's also from an infrasound from that perspective. So I said, we'll go to the next slide about what I suggested to him. And afterwards, didn't hear from him since. So he's actually, it was definitely infrasound that was making him feel uncomfortable. And even his friends, when they turned up to his place as well. Also, if it's infrasound, where is it coming from? That's another way to detect it. Another way how you can do that is you could also look at investing in an infrasonic sound level meter. And they can range from about 100 to 700-ish. And that was Australian dollars. So convert that to US dollar. Or you could look at hiring one. So maybe hiring one would be a little better because not every case is going to need an infrasonic monitor. If you use one, try using it at the most quietest time of the day or night and the less windiest part of the day as well. You want to get as best reading as you can. Now, if infrasound is coming from the environment and isn't able to be fixed soon, encourage the people living nearby to listen to music or to break the constant sound. So that's what I suggested to this lovely man. And also keep in mind that some people will be more susceptible to infrasound than others. And this can sometimes be attributed to age. Now, if it's a factory or a dam that's causing it, encourage the tenants to write to the council and have someone come in and conduct a full inspection of their location. Technically, you shouldn't really be having any infrasound issues in any newish style buildings. In Australia, we call it an EIS, which is an environment impact study. So that's usually done before any building happens. So technically, no one should be having infrasound issues when there is a new build. But sometimes the environment can change around, sometimes circumstances and new buildings, and say wind turbines as well. Sometimes that can actually affect the person. Right, carbon monoxide. What is it? It's a colorless, odorless, toxic, flammable gas formed by incomplete combustion of carbon. It has no smell, no taste, and no sound. Neither people nor animals can tell when they are breathing it in, but it can be fatal. Now, having spent most of my life in Australia and having moved to the UK, a lot of fireplaces have these little sort of plastic. They look like a little plastic. It's that size of a phone, but it's a bit thicker. It has a light that flashes every now and then. And I remember thinking, what's this for? And because in Australia it only gets cold for 3 months of the year, it's a carbon monoxide detector. Every home has to have them. Thankfully. How does it affect paranormal investigating? A person who is exposed to carbon monoxide may notice that something is wrong, but they may not know where the symptoms are coming from. The person may feel as if they have the flu, but without the temperature. If several people in the same building have the same symptoms, it could be CO2 poisoning. It could. Within a few hours of first being exposed, a person may experience a loss of balance, vision problems, memory problems, eventual loss of consciousness, And if the symptoms are mild, there's usually a full chance of recovery. Serious CO gas poisoning can cause long-term problems, including heart damage. People with heart-related or breathing problems tend to be more affected quickly by CO2 gas poisoning. Pregnant women, you've got babies, small children are also susceptible. Pets too can react quickly to CO poisoning as well. Now, if this happens, all cooking and heating appliances should be switched off, all the windows opened, and their local gas safety authorities notified. The longer the individual is exposed, the more severe the symptoms can actually become. Other symptoms may later include, or even months after inhaling CO gas, confusion, memory problems, and coordination difficulties. Right, how do you detect it? PAE. Possible sources of CO gas can be household appliances, such as your gas fires, boilers, central heating, you've got water heaters, cookers, literally anything that generates heat. Running a car engine in an enclosed space can also cause CO poisoning. Household appliances should also be well serviced and used safely when they will only emit small amounts of CO gas. So literally have it checked, have all your appliances checked, or encourage a person to have all their appliances checked if that could be the case. Using old appliances and not servicing them frequently can lead to high risks of CO emission. Some other causes of CO gas emission. Smoking cigarettes can cause high blood levels in someone's body. Leaving a car in a closed garage with its engine running, that's very, very, very important not to do. Burning charcoal produces CO gas. Blocked flues and chimneys can stop CO2 from escaping. You've got fumes from other paint removers and cleaning fluids can also cause CO2 poisoning. So it's not just anything that generates heat. It could also be chemical from products around the home. Products that contain methylene chloride should be handled with care because methylene chloride turns into CO2 when you breathe it in. Right, you've done well. This is the last one, audible and visual pareidolia. I do like the drunk octopus wants to bite. That's one of my favorite. And I'm thinking that if all vegetables looked as horrible as those on the right-hand side there, I don't think any child would eat them. But of course, audible and visual pareidolia is very common, known around the paranormal community, and it should very much be so. It's it's literally the basic psychology of how our minds work. So audible pareidolia, we're going to hear something that may be like a frequency. It could be any sound, to be brutally honest. But our brains are trying to make sense of it, and often we may think we're hearing voices. An example of that is my lovely fiance was a mechanical engineer, and he was walking through tunnels that had just been built in London, and they just put the fans on. They had the extraction fans on, and he's walking down these tunnels, and he said, "Sweetheart, I can hear music." Because I just need more sleep. I think I'm going crazy. I said, "No, sweetheart. It's just audible pareidolia." He's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, your mind is trying to make of this low vibration sound that you're listening to." And I said, "Look, when they shut down the fans and they do the maintenance," I said, "See if you notice a difference." Sure enough, the music stopped. He was one happy man. So again, our bodies are trying to find familiarity and pattern. Visual pareidolia is when we see faces or familiar shapes. Faces particularly because that's the thing that's what we see more than anything. That's what we concentrate on more. To be familiar, to see a familiar face, then you're safe. An unfamiliar face, you're not safe. So when it comes to visual pareidolia, it's always often people say, "I saw a face in the window," and we'll go into that as well. Some people will know the term apophenia. The difference between pareidolia and apophenia is apophenia means you've had personal connection to whatever it is that you're seeing. So say, for instance, the babies in the kneecaps, example in the middle there, you might actually have twin children and you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like my twins are in her kneecaps," because there's a personal connection what you're having with the particular visual pareidolia. Right, paranormal investigators generally occur at nighttime when our eyesight is already compromised due to lack of light. We are already more susceptible to making sense of what we're trying to see. But generally for investigators, these faces appear to be more of ghosts and demonic entities, and less likely to be of Jesus on the toast. So how do you know if you've actually captured a face or not in a photo? One good practice is to get into taking a series of shots at the same time. So for example, you take 6 shots in a few seconds. That way, if the anomaly is appearing in all the photos, there's a good chance it's just pareidolia. And again, that the photo on the right-hand side is of a property in Adelaide, in South Australia. And, it's a great capture. It's a perfect example of pareidolia, and it's a location that's meant to be haunted. And anyone who would have seen it and didn't have the knowledge of how easy it is for visual pareidolia would have run with that and posted it all over the internet. Right, audible pareidolia is when we hear sounds and our brains try to make sense of it. Voices are the most common sounds we hear, followed by music. So again, we are already predisposed to hearing voices in the slightest of sounds without anything having really been said, living or dead. Even if it's suggested that the voices can be heard in a location, this alone is enough for our brains to find the closest match to that recognized pattern. So how do you detect it or find your PAE? So say if it's something that you've recorded, something you've got your digital recorder out, you think you might have actually picked up an anomaly that could sound like a voice. Don't tell anyone what you think it was at the time, and have someone else listen to it and see what they think it might be being said. And also keep in mind your own biases and beliefs with that. So, there is an element of excitement sometimes if you've gone to a historical public location, you think, oh, do an audio recording, see if anything comes back. I really would love something to come back, and we might have something there. It's really hard to not get excited if you think you have. Got to be as middle ground, as middle, and as logic as possible. Thank you very much. You survived. There's some websites there for if you want to find out a little bit more about me on social media and on the internet as well. But I shall now jump on out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Beth. This is really great. These are things that I think are really important for people and other investigators to know about. It seems that a lot of people in the amateur paranormal community actually aren't really familiar with a lot of these things, and they're really important. I think they're a part of what the late Robert Morris had called not psychic but looks like it, in which he referred to things which are very normal, but depending on certain people's perceptions and their predispositions, they can actually perceive and interpret as being paranormal when it's actually not. So these are really things that you have to go at first before actually concluding that it might be paranormal. And so, and I agree with you that it's important where they have to be mindful of their psychological situations, and also when they say that seeing is believing, for them it also works the other way around too, where believing is seeing, basically what you want to see based on your own predispositions. So that's always good especially when it comes to public situations and interpreting what a lot of a lot of the information that's given out on television shows and a lot of the other events. It's good to be a little bit questionable.
Oh, absolutely. And I often, when investigating possible phenomena, I kind of categorize it generally in 2 different parts. I go, is it an inside job or an outside job? So is it something that's potentially from a psychological perspective, or is it an environmental science perspective? And then I kind of break it down from there. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. If you have any questions, everybody, please put them in the chat and I will go through them. I noticed a few in the beginning here, so let me scroll up here. Jokin had asked, can infrasound be detected separately even if other sounds are present in the environment?
That's a tough one. It depends on your detection equipment, essentially. But yes, it should be able to. But again, you are literally, with all respect, at the whim of the environment itself. So the irony is, investigating at nighttime is all spooky, but nighttime would be the best time to try and detect infrasound where other sounds will not sit there and infiltrate it. So it's a blurred area in that department. Technically it should, but like you said, I agree. I think it's you'd have to try and pick the quietest time to eliminate the possibility of anything else contaminating your infrasound detector.
Yeah, and Dr. Hideyuki Kakubo had commented in relation to that, is that microbarometers are needed to detect infrasonic sounds, and usually infrasonic cannot be detected by ordinary sound meters, and that's certainly the case. They usually need to be specified to and specialized, especially built to actually detect the specific frequency range in which infrasound works. So that's a good point. And let's see, and we have questions here. Let me go through the chat. Let's see. Let's see. Anybody else have questions here? Let's see. Let's see. I believe Nancy was asking, what resources are out there for ghost hunters to get more education on the methodological side?
Oh, it's very difficult to find because a lot of information can be very academic, very needed. Lots of, it's not like we've been on the scene 10 years. This has been happening for hundreds of years. So, but it can be very, very academic. And of course, there's the layman sort of style of information that's out there, which is running around with what was known as a K2, which is a very, very budget style EMF detector. And people believe that, teaching people how to use that as well. So to find like something that's middle ground, it's very, very difficult. Again, obviously the Rhine Institute, you could kind of pull that in a little bit. I think Lloyd's courses are fabulous. Obviously I've done with them as well. But at least there's he brings in a lot of, I say layman as such, but some of the research, which is something that, investigators should be aware of and should be learning. Obviously the SPR here, Society of Psychical Research, they've got some great information that's out there, but again, it can be sometimes considered too academic for a lot of layman people as such. So finding the methodologies and the great, like what to actually do when you're out there physically field investigating, it's very hard to find reliable information in that regard. There's so many online courses out there about how to investigate. And once you've done it, you're a certified paranormal investigator. I wouldn't touch those with a barge pole. I always, anything I ever learn, I learn from those who actually have the qualifications to do it, and it's solid information. And not, learning techniques is one thing, but again, I want to have something that's backed up. But yeah, it is very difficult to find anything that's the proper methodology. Steve Parsons, who's part of SPR, has what is known as the Blue Book and the Red Book. What the Blue Book is investigation techniques and how to do it from a methodological perspective. That's a good start. And his Red Book is about using equipment effectively. He's a big equipment fan in the sense of actually detecting the environment, not speaking to spirit. And again, that's the angle that investigators should be going down. And we don't know if there's an afterlife. We may never know. We can discuss the possibilities of it, but in the meantime, let's look at what's changing in the environment, because we know that is something that is there. It's out there. It's proven.
Yeah, that's good. I would also recommend, of course, to some of the blogs that you did on Access Paranormal website, which actually offer some really good tips. And so that's one thing I really liked about your website and asked you to present on here.
Wow, cool.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? And I agree with Jokin's comment that he says, excellent and important lecture, as conventional explanations should always be considered and checked. Not all ghost hunters are aware of this, especially orbs on videos and visual pareidolia, which is definitely the case too.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeannie is thanking you for your presentation with good info. And asking, Nancy was asking about the ASSAP, the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. And she was wondering whether there's a cultural difference between what Australian ghost hunters do and English ghost hunters, the British ones.
There are actually, it's more like the terminology. Some things are slightly different. But generally it's about the same. I know in Australia there's the Australian Institute of Psychical Research, or APA as we call it, and they are kind of like the Aussie version of SPR. But again, they have a yearly conference as well, and there's so much more happening in the SPR here, so much more from a paranormal and psychical research perspective here in the UK, because it's been running longer. And because it's a population thing as well. So there's a lot more opportunity to learn here in different ways than it is back in Australia. So probably out of anything, it's more to do with the population than an actual cultural thing. There are a couple of terminology differences, but generally it's the same.
Let's see. And Nancy was wondering how you got interested in this topic.
Oh, it's the gold standard answer at the moment. I have always been interested in it. And the two areas I was always intrigued as growing up as a teenager was how people can know something from another person without being conventionally told, like through the normal ways of communication or other ways. Like, how can someone know about someone's passed over grandmother who, used to make the most amazing cakes and at this time of the day? And I thought, how can that happen? It's fascinating. And also how objects moved on their own. I always, it defies physics. How can this happen? And I think it's, I did the conventional sort of ghost hunting sort of style investigating for a couple of years. And that's why I find my biggest passion is there is a middle ground investigator. You've got beautiful academics and research up here, and you've got your running around with flashing light gadgets down here. But there's a middle ground investigator that's starting to grow. And that's where I found myself fitting in, because I'm like, I'm done with the cheap sort of events. I want to get stuck in and learn as well, and also record what I'm doing and the experiences and cases I deal with, and then pass that on somewhere else. So later down the track, that can actually be looked upon and go, oh, that's interesting because that happened on this case, and you can start to pull it together and find a pattern. So yeah, it's I've always been interested, but yeah, it's definitely beginning to be a little bit more middle ground, definitely middle ground, 100%.
That's a good approach. That's the way knowledge advances. That's a systematic approach. That's good. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Can I actually just speak just because I'm driving? Would that be okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Your speaker was actually speaking there about the psychical research books, the red and the blue book, written by Stephen Parsons. And I know that there are investigators courses that Stephen Parsons himself is teaching on behalf of ASSAP, which is the scientific study of anomalous phenomena that you were just speaking about. And he actually teaches them. So the same writer of those two books, which are very good for investigators, and they're coming up, and where you become an accredited investigator for ASSAP. And then next year, I know there are the registered investigators, but they're quite intense weekend study periods where you are actively, on site for an entire day or for an entire weekend of training. So I just thought I'd just add that there.
Fabulous. Thanks. I've only just recently found that out myself, and I'm certainly already got my name down for that, because it's such a great way to kind of lift the credibility of people who do investigate. And ASSAP's brilliant investigator, company and charity, and just, yeah, Steve Parsons is, sort of one of the legends here in the UK. So yeah, they're great, and they're just really well, I think it's going to be really well put together from what you can see. And just, it's solid information. It's what we should all be, going against, as opposed to being around in the dark.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And there's, if you look at some of the organizations that are out there, they do different types of classes and workshops, and also discussion days. Like the SPR has their usually every once in a while. I think they still do it monthly. They usually have like some type of discussion day focused on a specific topic, and occasionally it's on relation to ghosts and hauntings, and also other aspects of psychic phenomena. And you look at other groups such as the ASSAP, they also do that as well, and also they host online talks as well that they archive on their YouTube page. So there are different modes of outreach that some organizations do that are really useful, and that can are good to look out for. So, and Tom Ruffles actually put up the links to Carson's books. So I thank you for that, Tom. That's very useful. Anybody else have any questions or comments? And I wanted to thank you, Elaine, too, for that comment that you made while you were driving. So thank you for coming on and sharing that information about Steve with us. Okay, so then right now it looks like everybody else is we can go ahead and wrap up. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nancy to tell us who's coming up next.
Thank you so much, Beth. I didn't get a lot of it, but I know that I'm going to just love it when I get into, not only am I a geek for methodology, but this is such an important area of information, and I'm really going to enjoy pumping up that volume and hearing what you actually said. It's just I said to Brian in the chat that what a choice. I had never heard of you before, and I just said to him, oh, this is so excellent. I said, don't be shocked when I email you and ask you to to maybe let me interview you for my channel. It's so important, and it's one of those things that you've got to have you've got to have credibility with the other ghost hunters. Back in the day, the Parapsychology Foundation tried to set up with Lloyd Auerbach a series of workshops for the ghost hunters of the time. So this was like 2000. And absolutely nobody except for our friends were interested in having anything to do with it. And I think mainly the biggest problem was, other than Lloyd, at the PF, we didn't have that kind of experience or that kind of craft knowledge about what needed to be said, what was going on, what were the problems, and so on. And this is just marvelous to see what you guys are up to. And I am really appreciating the fact that you came along to give this talk. I think it's really important, and I think the folks that were here also feel that way as well. Well, I'm going to share my screen, and I just wanted to share this slide to let you know that Christopher Larson and Susan Demeter had to postpone their talk that would have taken place tomorrow, but they are working with Brian to come up with another date in the course, so you won't miss them entirely. They'll be back with us on the schedule in the next couple of weeks before the course is over. So that's something to let you know. And then our next one is on March 14th at 6 p.m. Central. It's called Apparitions and Ghost Experiences, an Introduction. Terry Olson from the Australian Institute for Parapsychological Research and Rob Tilley from Parapsychology Australia will be speaking, and they're going to be on the camera at the same time, so it may not be so part one, part two. So it should be quite interesting, and I hope you all will be able to come along. So I also wanted to mention again that I'm about a half an hour away from finishing up Hideyuki's video, so that will be posted, and I'll be dropping you guys a line about that through the email. And then I hope to be uploading also Beth's presentation this afternoon or early evening. There was something else in my head I've forgotten. Oh, I wanted to say that I went through the registration list. We had another registrant yesterday, and we're up to 131 people who are registered for this course. Obviously, the majority of the folks are time shifting and watching the videos, but we're quite excited that that was the that's the number of people that we've gotten after having such a long hiatus in the course. And I just want to say thank you to all you guys who got up early this morning or rolled in here in the afternoon or the evening to see Beth. I think this is one of the best ones that we've had so far. If you're looking for Steve's books, there's a link in the chat from Tom Ruffles, and Bob Paddock put put up the upcoming information about the Institute for Consciousness Research Laboratories events. This is was Bob John and Brenda Dunn's foundation, and Jeff Dunn is running it. So he put all that information in the chat as well. If you have any questions or anything that you need, or any problems between now and the next conversation, just email us at parapsychologyonline@gmail.com. And if you have friends who would like to come in and join us, definitely have them send an email that says register in the subject line. And that's all you need to do. The other thing is that Natasha Chistis is working on a report of our questionnaire. So if you haven't taken the course questionnaire and would like to, you can also email me at parapsychologyonline@gmail.com. And hopefully we will have that information for either next week's newsletter or the following week. We also have some interesting ways of discussing for the rest of our year. In addition to having the Zoom meetups, which we can continue, if people are interested. I have don't laugh, but I have a library in the virtual world Second Life, which has been there one way or the other since 2009. I'm in the process of rebuilding my collection in the building. Brian can testify that it's kind of fun to be in Second Life, because not only do we get to sit in a room together and feel like we actually are together, but when we're done with our discussions, we can go off and see zoos and cathedrals and go play someplace. And it's an interesting experience. So there will be more information about that next week and later this week, probably. Well, next week and later, maybe the early part of the next week. We're thinking about having the Second Life meetup to be either the third or fourth Sundays every month going forward. So we're back, basically, is the is the info. So thank you again, Beth. It was just absolutely wonderful, and I can't wait to hear all of the details. Unfortunately, you were in that frequency area that I couldn't always hear what you were saying, but everybody loved you, so I'm really looking forward to it. So I want to say thank you again, and hope to see you on the 14th of March. Bye now.